And so I'm excited to introduce to you this next panel, where I happen to have the privilege of knowing all three of these for quite some time. And we were going to start out with me telling stories, but I was like, gosh, that will take a long time. So I'm not gonna go there. But I absolutely adore all three of these people. They are three people that I have over the years touched base with on many occasions to get information, to share ideas. And so we're thrilled to have all three of them with us. I should mention to you, if you have your agenda or if you need one, let us know. But in the back are the bios for everybody. So I'm not going to go through everybody's bio and all their introductions. But we have Margy on the right, Leah in the middle, and Brett, another Brett here on my left, your left. And you can read all about each one of them in the bios in the back of the agenda too. So they're going to talk a little bit about some of these disruptions and some of the challenges that as retailers that you're dealing with and that you've been talking about, and some of the things you've been mentioning to us that are important to you. And really, why is it important now? Why is the timing now that we should be addressing some of these challenges and really take on that opportunity to lead? So with that, Margy, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Tracy. You know, Kevin at New Way asked me this morning, Shane Thomas and I were talking about all the demands on our schedules right now. And Kevin asked me, he's like, Margy, how do you decide where you're going to go? And I had only had half a cup of coffee, so I gave a very, very long answer. But now that I've had a cup and a half, I have a clarifying answer, which is, first, I see if it works logistically. And second, I see, are these going to be super smart people in the room? So that made the decision to be here with you today very easy, because I knew we would be in a room of very, very smart people. So Leah and Brett, thank you for being willing to share some insights. We're talking about big disruptions, big challenges. First, to each of you, Leah, if you could start, perhaps share the biggest disruption you're focusing on, as well as the biggest challenging that you're focusing on right now.
So that's a big question because it's hard to narrow it down to just one. I think as Winfield United, what we're really looking at is really tied to what Brett was speaking about. Where is the consumer going? What's happening with things we can't see around the corner when it comes to things like regulatory, ESG, and how can we put our retailers really in a position to be prepared to face those challenges proactively versus having them sort of be dictated to us in terms of being told how it's going to be. We're trying to shape, we call it shaping the future of agriculture, by really finding ways to open up access to new markets in food, feed, fiber, and fuel. So that's probably the opportunity area we're focused on the most, is really how do you find new sources of revenue, blue ocean, new sources of profitability for our system and ultimately the growers that we serve. Challenge-wise, there's a lot of challenge. I would say it's probably speed. I think a lot of us in the room were here because of what you just said, Margy. We get where the opportunity is, but how do we go faster? How do we accelerate our ability to meet some of those opportunities that we're talking about as we try to shape those new markets? And that's honestly, I think, where the AgVend partnership comes in for Winfield United selfishly, is how can we together accelerate our retailers' ability to meet the future faster, better, cheaper, in a more streamlined way. Excellent.
Good morning, everyone. So I work for a fertilizer manufacturer. So I'm going to kind of bounce back and forth in terms of my questions. 15 years of my career was in ag retail across 3 different organizations that covered most of the Corn Belt. And so when I think about challenges that I assume you're all facing, they're a little bit different than the challenges that I face in my current role working for Anuvia Plant Nutrients. So a lot of comments on crop nutrition before Brett wrapped up his section. So that's the industry I play in today. Anuvia manufactures advanced, enhanced efficiency fertilizer. And so what we focus our time on, because we're brand new, we've only been around for 7 years, is trying to build a market and align with retailers that we think are the right retailers. And we do maybe not quite as sophisticated as what Aimpoint does, but we have kind of a view of what the right retailer looks like. And then my team attempts to build relationships with the right retailers. And I bring my retail experience in to help them understand what questions they ask, what are the pain points, and then we focus our efforts on helping them make a good crop inputs, in this particular case, fertilizer decision. When's the right time to buy, how much to buy, how do you bring traditional risk management techniques to that purchase, and do it while the retailer's trying to manage all the dynamics that Brett alluded to earlier with your farmers, with all the trends that are going on and the issues you face. As I think about the retailer specifically, there are several things that come to mind that I think are challenges that you're facing with. And the first one I mentioned, how do you help a farmer make a good decision when we've got the volatility in the fertilizer and commodity markets that we have today? And Brett touched on it. They're not correlated one-to-one. There's a lead and there's a lag, but it does create enormous opportunity to help a farmer make a good decision on when to buy and take advantage of those disconnections when they occur. So that's one opportunity and challenge I see for retailers. Managing the speed of the farmer is another one that we don't talk about a lot, but I was at the Farm Progress Show 2 weeks ago, Boone, Iowa. The John Deere X9 combine. So Matt, you're a John Deere guy, right? You have an X9? How many bushels of corn will that harvest in an hour? 1,400 bushels of wheat an hour, so I'm going to convert that to kind of Midwestern corn. 7,200 bushels of corn in an hour. And for those of you that have grain businesses, think about the unload speed of a lot of your dumps. It probably doesn't keep up with that one combine. So as a retailer, how do you keep up with the farmer? And then inject weather volatility into that. We've got fewer days to work now than we did 10 years ago. How do you manage that? We talk a lot about labor. And labor isn't an issue if you have the right tech and the right process in the right place at the right time. But too many times we find ourselves disconnected on one of those four dimensions. So as I think about a retailer, I think those are the challenges that you all face and opportunities that you have to get better and serve the farmer of the future.
How come you got more than one?
Well, I asked for a challenge and an opportunity.
I'm just teasing.
Okay. The rules are loose, Leah. She is apt to break them. Listen to this. So after Brett's presentation just now, talking about that farmer of the future, that's just in 2040, right? Leah, you talk about accelerating the need to change. Brett, you talked about these opportunities to lead. After Brett's presentation this morning, where do you see the prime opportunity for the retailer of the future to meet their new customer expectations?
So I think to reflect on the comments I just made, I think first it's help them make a good decision in this volatile environment. And there's some basic things you can do. There's some more advanced things you can do. I mentioned I spent most of my career in ag retail, and 10 years of that was with Cargill. Arguably the best risk managers in the world. And when we went through this commodity expansion in 06, 07, those of you that were in the procurement side of the business, Don, I know you were in that seat, wasn't a fun time. We'd never seen that before. We're seeing it again, maybe not quite as acute as it was in 06, 07, but I think some of the same principles apply. Help the farmer take some emotion out of it. There's some simple things you can do to turn $1,200 phosphate into how many bushels of corn is it and help them make a good decision. I think that's one of the big opportunities for a retailer moving forward. Back to the right tech at the right time and the right process. In a prior life, I helped build a grain facility that runs with one person. The technology's out there today to do that. Doesn't mean you run it that way, but when you think about the drivers of change, when you think about labor shortage, fast farmers, less days to get work done, it is possible to build a grain elevator with only one person. And the one piece we can't seem to figure out is how do you grade grain? That's what you need that one person for. That's it. Everything else can be automated. Eventually we'll figure that out as well. So I think that's an opportunity as a retailer. How do you start to patch together all that technology? Last night, Alexander talked a lot about a digitally connected supply chain, again, helping the farmer make a good decision using tech like the kind that AgVend affords to get those farmer decisions into your ERP system very quickly and help you manage your risk positions. I think that's an opportunity for the retailer. And then the whole notion of ROI, helping the farmer make good decisions around products and services that drive ROI. I was at Farm Future Summit in January. Actually, Aim Point had a representative there. And I found myself sitting next to a large farmer at breakfast the third day. And we got to talk, and he's probably one of the bigger farmers in Iowa. There's 100 counties in Iowa, and he's farming in 44 of them, just to give you kind of a sense for scale. I don't know how it came up, but ROI, he introduced the notion. I said, hey, how do you use ROI to make decisions. What's a good ROI? In my business, we like 3 to 3+. We think it's a good ROI. His was 2.5, and it took him no time at all to answer that question. 2.5 ROI, I'm in. I said, well, how do you decide what technology to use and what technology not to use? There's so much technology trying to find its way onto the acre. He said, I rely on my retailer to make that decision. So again, I think that's another role you all play, is helping flatten the learning curve on the tech that helps the farmer drive ROI, and then getting that into their hands very quickly.
Those are great comments. I mean, what I would add is around the risk sharing and the risk management piece a little bit. A lot of the things that we're talking about today for a farmer introduces additional risk to their operation. And the reality is that today the grower is taking on most of the risk themselves. And they're looking for help sharing that risk in a more equitable fashion. And so I think the role of the retailer is going to be not only to help make the right decisions agronomically and from an ROI perspective, but to help the grower get some risk sharing. And that's where things, like Winfield United's Advanced Acre RX platform and things come in. I also think it's around this notion of helping the retailer bring connectivity to the options and the opportunity they're bringing to the grower that might be bigger than what they can see locally. If you think about the world where we're capturing more of the food dollar, today the every dollar the consumer spends, the grower gets about 14 cents of that. And if we're really serious about trying to get the grower something more like 20 or 30 or 40 cents of that, how do we help the retailer get access to the opportunities with the General Millses of the world that are bigger than maybe they can go after on their own? That's this notion of, we talked, Brett, you said we need to be more open to connections, to alliances, to partnering. What can we bring to the retailer to open up the opportunity to add value to grain in a new, fresh way that maybe isn't possible locally? I think that's going to be part of it. So risk sharing, market connectivity to new opportunity. And then also there's something around data. And I guess, Brett, it maybe also goes back to data privacy, but the retailer is going to have to be really good at helping a grower collect their data seamlessly, have it be integrated so that they can make decisions seamlessly, and so that their experience running their farm for maximum ROI is as simple as possible. And there's tremendous work that needs to still be done there on behalf of the retailer so that they can do that in a more expedient fashion than I think a lot of us are today.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. So tech is a helper, an accelerator, not the enemy. Also, farmers are going to have to adjust how adverse they are to risk. Really, this is talking about a new mindset. Leah, first to you, then to you, Brett. Do you have anecdotes perhaps from even other industries of change management and how we can get from point A to point B?
Sure. So I have a little bit of an atypical background. Alexander, you kind of warmed my heart last night when you said you chose agriculture. I'm one of those as well. I chose agriculture. My career did not start in agriculture. I have a math and a computer science degree, and I spent my first 15 years working in banking and healthcare. And I worked in banking during the time of the early 2000s when banking was going through sort of a digital revolution. And I ran IT strategy for U.S. Bank, one of the top banks in the country. And I have a memory, I've shared this with Tracy, so sorry for repeating my story, but I think it's applicable. I have a memory of working for a U.S. Bank who was at that time spending $1.1 billion a year on technology, arguing with the head of consumer banking as we were preparing a board presentation because we were going in asking for significant investment to rebuild what was at the time the retail consumer website and then also build a mobile app. And the head of the consumer banking group was irate because he said, this is a waste of money. The trusted advisor is that banker. Nobody's ever going to stop working with that banker. You're wrong. That relationship is more important than anything else. It's a waste of money. It's never going to work. Now, I asked by show of hands, who in this room today has been to a physical bank in the last year? Okay, so maybe a fourth of us. And I'm going to guess when you did that, it was probably because you had a transaction that you felt was rather large in nature or represented significant risk. But for the menial run-of-the-day tasks, opening up a new checking account, withdrawing, opening up a small loan, most of us are doing that online, aren't we? What the banks figured out was that it wasn't about replacing that trusted advisor. It was actually about amplifying that trusted advisor, stretching that trusted advisor so that the in-person work they were doing was much higher value, much more sophisticated, and much more critical to a consumer's life. And the thing the banks really figured out was how to make the switching costs high because of technology that was being wrapped around the consumer experience. So I'm going to bet that most of the folks in the room that haven't been to a physical bank are probably doing most of their bill pay online. You probably have it all set up on your phone. In my case, I really don't even know who I'm paying bills to anymore because it's all set up through my, in this case, US Bank mobile app. The switching costs of me having to reset that up are so high. I can't imagine a world where I'd be pissed off enough to actually switch my bank. And I ask you to indulge me in this long story because that's the magic that we're going to figure out together, is what can we do to wrap the technology using data around the experience our retailers are bringing to their grower, such that that's so rich, the switching costs are too high to decide to go somewhere else. That's the magic ticket, and I think we can look to some other industries and our own personal experience as a guide for where we want to head long term there.
Excellent.
So I'm going to defer the external industry examples to Leah because I'm an Aggie, farm kid, so I've spent my entire career in agriculture. But I've got plenty of examples of change management. Many didn't go well, a few that did. And so kind of a practitioner's guide when you're driving change and when technology or hardware is involved, farmers tend to get really enamored with, I saw paint mentioned on one of your slides, retailers as well. And whether you're making a decision to standardize a fleet. So Reader, I think that was one of your comments. Is Reader still in the room? Where he standardized the fleet so he could move faster with less people. Similar approach I took in a previous life when I was in retail, trying to standardize a fleet of 70 pieces of equipment, average age of 16 years. You got all different kinds of controllers. And you've got all these reasons why that particular applicator wants that piece of equipment. Some of it's relational. They like their tech rep that takes care of it. Some of it's they just like green paint. But driving a change like that within a cooperative system and or an independent, I've had the chance to work for both, and there's some nuances there. You gotta create a business case for why you have to change. You gotta cast that vision as a leader. Here's where we're going. Here's why we have to go there. And then along the collaboration lines, this is an internal collaboration. You get key stakeholders in the room. You know, in my instance, it was I got the 8 to 10 best applicators in a room and got their input. And we had every color of paint in the rainbow. And so you slowly work through those changes, but you can't just think about the hardware or the software. It's the people, it's the process, it's the business case, it's the governance system that kind of manages that after the fact. And you have to have a little intestinal fortitude. You know, these decisions aren't easy for a leader. They can be, you can see some tears, kind of like the comments Brett made earlier. But just driving that change, I think it's key to cast a business case as to why. Get your teammates involved, get the farmer involved where possible. It's a lot easier for people to edit than create, so come into it with the vision of where you're going to go, whether that's an ERP change, whether that's changing in your fleet. But those are some principles that I've used in my career that have been pretty helpful.
So I identify the problem before you go searching for the solutions, right? Yeah. So the big question is, why now? Why is now the time to think about our trajectory and make those investments? And Brett, I'll pose that to you first.
Yeah, I think the previous speaker did a nice job of why now. So we've got 17 years to get to 2040. Fortunately, it happens one day at a time. So I think that's one of the biggest whys now, is for that very reason. You know, in addition to that, I think the grower kind of expects us to help them get there where possible. So I think that's another reason why the why is now, is let's take advantage of this pivotal opportunity to help kind of usher in the next generation of grower.
I would add on that I think right now we're in a position of strength. And it's always easier, in my view, to take step change levels of transformation from a position of strength versus scrambling and being on defense. And I think a lot of retailers have had a couple of great years, thanks to our owners. Winfield United has had a couple of great years, and it's time to now shape the market again. There's a story that I told at breakfast this morning that is sort of a parable, I guess, that I know resonated with me. We have a CEO advisory council that we meet with every other month at Winfield United, and one of the GMs of one of the largest cooperatives in Iowa was sharing that when it came to some of these new market pieces, especially around ESG and sustainability, he was sort of like, that's all politics. Don't get me started. I'm not going to do that stuff. Until one day, this guy, he's feeding about 1 million hogs a year that he's selling to a swine integrator. Until a couple of months ago, that swine integrator came to him and said, oh, hey, by the way, if you want us to keep buying those 1 million hogs that you feed, you're going to need to show us how the corn and the other pieces that you're growing, that you're feeding those hogs, are being grown, and being able to tie a sustainability assessment to them. And no, we're not paying you a premium for that. That's a real story that's only a month or so old now, and it makes this real around, for me, why the time is now. Because it'll either get done to us, and retail will have to foot the bill, or we will get ahead of it, and we will shape it. We will set the market. We will lead the change. I'd rather be doing that from a position of strength than being on defense and being told what to do.
Perfect segue, Leah, into talking about those upstream and downstream opportunities. Specifically, do you maybe touch on a little bit around carbon and other evolving opportunities? And then Brett, also because of Anuvia's interesting technology, talk a little bit about sustainability.
So yeah, carbon's hot. You've been writing about carbon a lot lately. We're all reading The Scoop. I do. I read The Scoop every morning. I told Margy that. It's my morning cup of coffee.
Thank you.
But
click those articles, folks. Give me those ad impressions.
The carbon market is hot right now because it's something I think that a lot of people out there think they understand. And it's very noisy. And I think what we need to do as a system, especially through retail, is to make sure that we're helping growers first start with decisions that are the right agronomic decisions for their land and are ultimately driving soil health and productivity for the long term with that farmer's greatest asset, their land. That's what this is fundamentally about. In the middle, if we get it right, we'll help share some risk and we'll help them tap into revenue opportunities like carbon markets. Probably someday it'll be a lot more than carbon. It will be air, water, a variety of other things that will come along with sustainable farming. But in my mind, the focus on carbon is a little too narrow. It's fundamentally about productivity of the land, right choices for the grower over the long haul, and finding a way to help them get paid for the way that they're farming beyond just clipping a coupon, but truly because they're actually driving greater productivity over time for their operation.
So my organization's view on that, we personally appreciate the work that Land O'Lakes is doing as a bit of an aggregator around carbon and helping advise the farmer. So I'm a base manufacturer, and one of the reasons why I joined Anuvia several years ago, this technology has some really cool features for those that are keenly interested in environmental outcomes. You know, smaller greenhouse gas footprint. There's actually carbon in our product. We lead with ROI when we're talking to farmers, when we're talking to retailers. When we're talking to private equity, which we are private equity based, guess what? We lead with, we're the E in ESG, is how we like to position ourselves when we're talking to either an investor or a prospective investor. The reality of it is, the way we manufacture our product, we put carbon and organic matter back into the soil, which is, again, a really nice attribute that Anuvia has. We're not sure we have this whole carbon thing figured out. We think there's an opportunity. We think organizations like Winfield and Land O'Lakes that have significantly more horsepower than we do will kind of lead the way. True Terra is a great example. We view ourselves as a bit of an enabler of that strategy, where a retailer or a farmer, simply by using our technology, could benefit, whatever that benefit might be. I think it's still somewhat undefined, but not at the sacrifice of ROI. ROI still comes first. Soil health comes second, and then environmental outcomes comes third when we talk to farmers. So we think we've got an opportunity to enable success in the industry through our technology.
So we're up here, we're supposed to be talking about challenges and disruptions, one thing that has been a big development would be cost of capital. So Brett, a little bit, would you share your thoughts on the effect of ag retail?
Yeah, so cost of capital, you all are feeling it. It's probably about the time to do your budgets, or you just wrapped up, and I suspect your operating costs are going up on average 12 to 15%. And so as I put myself in that environment and try to think about how do I run that business, I think you got to go back to a lot of the things we talked about today. How do I leverage tech, to be more efficient? How do I collaborative partnerships to offset some costs, to focus on what's important to me? How do I evaluate projects? So when I deploy capital, am I using an NPV approach to determine which project gets funded as opposed to which projects don't get funded, versus the loudest individual in the room that's maybe championing their project? I think that's something you got to look at closely, use an NPV approach to choosing projects. My first house I bought in about '02, and I think my interest rate was 6.1%. My current house refinanced 18 months ago at 2.3. We're back up to close to 6. It's no different for your businesses. It just costs more money to run, so therefore you got to be really careful where you spend, how you spend, and what you invest in.
So this is a really good topic, and I think about it broadly as just in general, like what's the health of the channel right now? Right. Because the inflationary environment that we're operating in is one that as leaders, most of us have not seen in our lifetimes. The last time I read something this bad, most of the folks that were leading in business really in any industry are all retired now. So we're all going through this together as first timers. And I'll tell you some stats. So Winfield United, we call it 30-30-30. 30% more revenue since 2012. 30% fewer employees since 2012, 30% flip in boomers versus millennials. So now we're 48% millennial. And you think about those dynamics, and you think about the inflationary headwinds that we're facing. 11% increase just in T&E at Winfield United, 400% increase in legal fees, 200% increase in insurance. I can keep going on. It's going to be about a $25 million bar bill to the bottom line at Winfield United alone that we didn't plan for in our budget. And I bet you have similar stories as retailers. And what we're wanting to make sure retailers are thinking about is, because of all the appreciation in the market on the CN side, on the CP side, numbers look really good at the top, but wanting to make sure that people are really looking at volumes and making sure that they're truly growing when it comes to volume. What we did ourselves is we actually took our 2022 volumes and we applied our 2020 and our 21 margin structure to it, because we wanted to see if we were good or just lucky. And I'd suggest that you all go through a similar exercise because it was enlightening. So I think Brett's all over it, being very careful around where your spend is, not letting it bloat, thinking hard about that 30-30-30 I told you. Can we redeploy talent differently? Lots of conversations about talent with CEOs that I talk to. Number one concern area. But the answer can't just be throwing more bodies at it. How do we get more efficient? How do we continue to take cost out? How do we make sure we keep the eye on volume, not just price appreciation and what that looks like in a top line number? It's going to be critical as a management skill going forward.
Okay, gang, I've got 2 more questions for you. So last night, Alexander shared that enabling change means that you will be first in line to unlock new opportunities. We've talked about amplifying that trusted advisor. We've talked about staying ahead of the farmer. What would be your number one takeaway so our retailer partners today in attendance will help their farmers be first in line to unlock new opportunities?
You want to take that?
Oh, I mean, sure, I do. His answer's going to be better because he's had more time to think about it. I don't know. I'm reflecting. I mean, it's been a great couple of sessions last night and this morning, and I think, beyond the risk piece that I talked about, as a grower today, I'm mesmerized by the amount of complexity. Different people growers are dealing with, different decisions growers are having to make, different data streams growers are having to manage, different market opportunities they're having to make decisions around. It is all-consuming, and if you make the wrong set of calls, potentially disastrous. So I think about the opportunity really being in this zone of how can a retailer provide a way to simplify that complexity. How many folks could we make their day easier with if there was one place to go to do risk modeling, to do some, think back to the financial advisor concept. The financial advisor sits down with you and says, well, do you want an aggressive portfolio or a conservative portfolio? And let's model out if you did this with bonds or this with stocks, and look how that would look. Think about a world where as a retailer, you could provide that level of business acumen, that level of financial acumen to sit down and do some of that modeling, using all the data, using all the tools in one place. I think that's ultimately where we're going to need to go, because the grower is going to demand it. Earlier, you were talking about staying ahead of the farmer, and that he's going to demand it.
Great answer, Leah.
Well, thank
so
you.
If I could add to that.
Please, improve.
There's an enormous amount of technology today coming out of private equity trying to find its way on the farm. And that's one of the biggest challenges I face is how do I cut through all that noise on the behalf of the retailer and help them make a good decision that I think is my technology. There's retailers out there today, and some of them may be here in the room, where they have one person or a team of people that all they do is evaluate technology.
Right.
And it's interesting to watch that evaluation process and try to honor it, try to work through it. And oftentimes there's a 3-year timeline, which if you're in private equity, that's like nails on a chalkboard. When you think about 3 years and how much can change in 3 years, and nobody's business plan allows for that slow of an adoption of technology. Otherwise, we probably won't make it. And so as a retailer, how do you go on the offensive, reach out to whether it's equipment, where there's enormous opportunity there to get efficient, whether that's software, whether that's products, combination thereof, and proactively find those technologies that you think make sense for your grower. When these, a lot of these companies are starving for attention, and you can kind of corner the market from a temporary standpoint. If you can help them get to the market and get to their growers and come up with an innovation team within your farmers that like to take on new technology and give it a try, and try to figure out a way to flatten that learning curve. Because 3 years is too long to bring in and evaluate and execute on these technologies if you want to be in that group of growers that's to the left that was shown earlier. So that's one thing I would throw out to, and as being an ex-retailer, that scares the hell out of me because there's risk in that. Your relationship matters, the trusted advisor concept, but I do think there's an opportunity there for you all to play in seeking out and finding these technologies, collaborating, and helping the farmer adopt them quicker than what's going on today.
Yeah, it's interesting you strike a thought. We've been good at recommending products as a system for a while, having insights around which agronomic inputs and combinations thereof are going to produce what type of result. And really, it's extending that mindset towards technology products as well and having really the same capability to assist the grower with that selection.
Okay, last question for me will be, we're at the 2023 Partner Summit. What do you hope we are able to say about ag retail?
I'll take that one, give you more time to think. So a year from now, what can we hope to say? Well, first of all, I hope you're all back and you're just killing it. That's the first thing I'll say. Due in part to some of the things you learned from each other and from a few of us on stage. That would be a real humbling opportunity if you had a chance to learn and take it back home. And just be curious and continue to ask questions and try to push the envelope. And hopefully this room is twice as big next year as it is now. And you've got great stories about how you've helped your farmers take advantage of some of the trends that are pretty clear and pretty apparent.
Yeah, great answer again. I love how we team up here. You should have us back next year. That's what we would like. But I hope that our retailers are winning. I hope that the retailers in the room that have gotten on offense and are leading can see it in their share. I hope that you're driving a richer mix. I hope that you're prospecting new growers and pulling them into your business because you're offering an experience that's simpler, because you're offering insights, not information, because your people are leading with business acumen, not just a recommendation that you can also look up on Google. I hope the retailers in the room are leading. I hope they're winning, and I hope that they're using data, digital, and an open, I love that, Brett, an open mindset to do so. That's going to be I think, the secret sauce going forward.
Brett, Leah, thank you very much. Audience, will you please help me give them a round of applause?
Thank you, three. You're amazing. You got us back on time, too, on top of it. So I, of course, would always invite these three back because, as I mentioned, they're kind of three of my favorites. So thank you guys for helping bring some of Brett's points to real life. And I hope that as you're kind of listening to them think about, there's a couple of themes that you're really starting to pick up. Business-minded, whether it's the grower, you, or your salespeople. Jennifer Kilber heard me say this at AgTegra before. I have used Leah's story multiple times. How many of you have a trusted advisor on your team? Nobody? Have you used that term before? We've used that a ton at AgTegra. Our sales team, we're the trusted advisor, we're the trusted advisor, we're the trusted advisor. You are, but what does that mean? What does that mean to your growers? How are you going to help them really think about how they're running a business and really thinking about what that ROI truly is? So I think you'll continue to hear that theme and think about how you're going to really enable that open mindset and help really drive the change that your growers are actually really asking you for, and kind of thinking about that farmer of the future and how these disruptions and these challenges are such a huge opportunity for those of us that are trying to help them have a better business too. So thank you guys. I appreciate it.